Hi, friends. Welcome to the Mobile Bev Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing mobile bar and event professionals with the information they need to succeed. I'm your host, business coach, and founder of the Mobile Bar Academy, Sarah Murphy. In each episode, the Mobile Bev Pros team will bring you industry experts, information, anecdotes, and opinions with the goal of assisting you in building a profitable, sustainable, and successful business that supports you in creating wealth. I'm excited to share with you today's episode, so let's get started. Today in the podcast, we're going to diverge from our standard business-based content. And so I'm going to add a little disclaimer here in that I am not a medical professional. You are not a medical professional. We are not talking about any specifics regarding medicine or health or anything like that. What we are going to speak on is some of the things that we have noticed both in our own journeys and in the journeys of the people that we work most intimately with. Of all the things that we've done, we come from very different backgrounds. We have fairly different interest sets with, I would say, a few intersections that really bring us together and enable us to really complement the skill sets of each other, which makes us really powerful when we work together with people. And one of the common threads that connect us is that the work that we do focuses very heavily on putting people in their seat of power. And what that means is that we assist people in taking full ownership over their reality. Now, this is necessary from a business coaching standpoint because I can't help someone run a business unless they are willing to take full ownership of the entire business without saying, oh, the economy this, or oh, this competitor that. There's nowhere to go if we are starting from a place of, well, someone else is in control of my reality. So we work very hard on getting people to take what we call radical ownership from the very beginning of all of our programs. And recently I've been really trying to think or noodle on why we see more success with some clients that come in than other clients that come in, even though we set the expectation for both sets of clients that radical ownership is the foundation of everything we do. We even utilize the symbology of the crown, and we talk about how if you were the queen or king of your kingdom and there was a famine which you could not control, would you just throw your hands up and be like, oh, well, I guess everyone's starving because there's a famine? Or would you do something about it, right? And so that's the concept that we work with when we talk about putting CEOs, putting business owners, putting individuals in their seat of power, is that, yes, life happens to you. What's important is how you respond. And if you feel powerless and you don't respond at all, or you play the victim, then there's nothing that you and I can do with that, right? We can't work with them. So looking at these two sets, the people that come in and do really well and the people who kind of struggle with that. And I don't know that I've actually found an answer here. I'm not really sharing like anything that's like mind-blowing. But one thing that I can say that you and I have talked about actually this weekend is that there is a common denominator as to one of the things that we see in entrepreneurs that can stifle the likelihood that someone will succeed in their seat of power. So they might be willing to sit there, but how long and how well will they be able to take on the ownership of the seat of power without burnout or overwhelm or kind of crumbling into maybe some mental health situations or physical health situations. And so that's kind of what we want to talk about today is what does it look like when someone is either attempting to or has already accepted the seat of power, but then starts to stall out or lose momentum or struggle either physically or emotionally. And the semi-conclusion that I came to, again, this is all theory, is that the people who struggle the most in actually owning their seat of power and holding it are people who don't yet trust themselves. And obviously that has a psychology component, but we oftentimes see this very physically as well.
Yeah. And from an energetic standpoint, we see this in a neglecting of the inner self. We recorded a podcast last week that will never see the light of day because we had thrown so many topics into one podcast that we were like, where are we going with this? And we ultimately decided it wouldn't be of the highest service to put that out into the world. And so thankfully, clarity came over the weekend because I think we were kind of getting here. In that podcast, we talked about someone's ability to hold power when they receive it without offloading it. We talked about trusting themselves, taking responsibility, all these different concepts that now we're grounding into the body and taking responsibility for the temple that you use every day to do anything. If you're listening to this podcast right now, it's with your body, right? You need that bad boy to be in good health, but more so to be safe with you. Are you a good steward of your physical well-being? And from an energetic standpoint, I work a lot with the chakras, and this comes out in the root and in the sacral. Muladhara and Swadhisthana, both of them focus heavily on our ability to first trust and feel supported, feel secure in life, and then to move forward with that security and that trust into creativity so that we can literally bring things into the world, whether it be humans, businesses, whatever it is. And so anything that you build on an unstable foundation is in itself unstable. And so then we see people who can rock it out for a couple of months and then they're in deep burnout, and then their business suffers, they suffer, they're looking out into the world for security. Because that's the other thing about the root chakra is that when you sit with it, you recognize that security comes from within. It can't be given to you externally. And so it doesn't matter how much money gives you a sweet illusion of security, but we have seen, especially recently, that nobody with money is secure. And so it gives you the illusion of security, but that's an external thing. And so that's the depth of the victim nature, looking outside of yourself and saying, what outside of me will make me stable, will make me secure, will ground me and help me create this? When really the answers are within you. And it comes down to simply being with your body and listening to what it needs from you. And I think you're going to expand a little bit on that in the nervous system and such as we move forward. This is going to be juicy.
Yes. So if you are someone, and I'm speaking to the listeners, if you are someone who regularly says things like, oh, I forgot to eat today, or I haven't gone to the bathroom in 10 hours, or I only got 3, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours of sleep last night, even if you're one of those people that say, I only need 5 hours of sleep, you are likely not listening to the cues of your body. And I think society has largely encouraged not listening to the body. I grew up in a time of like extreme diet culture, wherein there's lots of tips, tricks, and hacks as to like how to ignore your hunger pains. And we know now that there's science to say intermittent fasting is a good thing for a number of things, including cellular regeneration, which we're not going to go into that today. When you're eating, but it's not rich in nutrients, your body gets hungry because it's like, hey, it's not necessarily saying like, hey, we're missing calories. It's saying like, hey, we're missing some key nutrients that we actually need to do our jobs here. The society has marketed different things with a lack of understanding of the full science of the body. And as a result, we have largely lost confidence and trust in the signals that our bodies are giving us. And so while that we could go really deep on that particular topic, the way that we see it, the way it shows up for us when we're working with clients, it is little kind of offhanded comments like, I didn't prioritize my sleep recently, or I haven't prioritized my sleep recently, or I forgot to eat all day yesterday. And what I have noticed, and this is my own personal journey, because as someone who was a burned out entrepreneur that's been on a multi-year journey of healing both my relationship with like productivity, but also the physical and psychological, emotional, mental relationship that I have with working and with my self-perception of what makes me valuable to the world, etc. One of the markers I think that science has really come to share with us is that there's this little metric called HRV that can tell you the health, more or less, of your nervous system. And it's not measuring how triggered you get. So, like, if I walk into the room and I go boo and I scare you, like, your nervous system should kick in and it should elevate and it should trigger, right? But the real measurement of your health is how fast does your nervous system recover from those things? And if you're chronically elevated, then you can actually do damage long term because you're using so many like nutrients. Like your body will even pull the stuff it needs out of your bones in order to do what it needs to do to keep you alive, because your body is aiming for homeostasis at all times, neutral state. It's aiming for that. And so it'll take whatever it needs. And it does the same thing if you're pregnant. So all the women that are listening, if you have made babies, like your body has robbed you dry of all the important things so that it could create life, right? We don't, I feel like, do a good job of loving on and nurturing or giving our mothers space to regenerate all of that after they have babies. It's 6 weeks and then you got to get back to work, right? And so we're already working from a deficient state as women, especially if we've made babies. But if you have I worked in the restaurant industry for 15 years, that's constantly keeping you at an elevated state, your nervous system, right? And who eats or pees when they're working in the restaurant? I didn't, right? So I was, conditioned to ignore those cues unless I had a break, which was like rarely. And so we start to see this, not when we're younger, but we start to see this as we get a little bit older in a variety of different ways. We see this with chronic pain. If you and I had $1 for every person who told us they had back pain in this industry, right? So we see this in autoimmune disorders. We see this in all sorts of different ways it shows up in the body, but not necessarily as it's happening. It oftentimes will show up later. And as someone who's celebrated their 41st birthday, I'm starting to see some of the impacts of my crazy youth in my health that I'm having to work extra hard to work with now. But this metric, HRV, which is just this baseline measurement of your nervous system, is rumored to be one of the best indicators of overall health, because your nervous system runs like everything. It runs your hormones, your sleep, your nervous system is pretty important. And so this metric gives you a good sense of where your nervous system is and how it responds to the environment around you. And I downloaded this app to give me an hour by hour measurement of my nervous system. And what I've learned over the past 7 days of using this app is really interesting to me. I was super hungry the other day. We went to the NSC soccer game. I just wanted a piece of pizza, but there's the tailgate thing, and I was wrangling kids and all sorts of things. And my notification starts to give me this overload, meaning my nervous system was overloaded. And I knew I needed to eat, and to know and to understand that even something as being hungry is overloading my nervous system. And so it basically is like, you're overloaded, take care of yourself. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go get some food and I'm going to sit down for a minute. And like, I regulated. So if you think about how many times in a day or in a week that we are probably, from a nervous system perspective, super overloaded and not listening to the cues of our body. And so what does our body do is it works extra hard to be like, okay, if she's not going to rest and fuel and, breathing exercises, when I'm working at my desk, if I get an overload or a pay attention alert and I sit up better and I breathe better, my HRV will rise again, which is a good thing. You want your HRV to be as high as possible. And so even not taking deep breaths throughout the day is like robbing your brain and your body of what it needs in order to perform optimally. Where I'm going with all of this is that when we get entrepreneurs into our containers and we see a lot of overwhelm, anxiety, and analysis paralysis, or the grind it out mentality where they just go, like they get great results. And you and I love that, right? It looks great when people are within our programming and they're getting great results. But that generally leads to a burnout at some point within the 1 year container, wherein they're just dead. They don't come to meetings, they can't, create any momentum. And my little theory here is like, yeah, mentally and emotionally, they've kind of tapped out. But I think also very physically, they're tapped out. They need to replenish the nutrient and the mineral stores in their bodies. They need to practice breathing exercise. They need to catch up on their sleep. There's an amazing book called Why We Sleep that talks about how important sleep is in all the various different functions of your body, not just emotional regulation or like the ability for your body to do its necessary things, but it actually like purges the brain of like detritus. Your body produces a bunch of different byproducts to like thinking and stuff. And so if you go too long without sleep and your brain doesn't have the ability to flush all of that out, you start to get brain fog. You're like, why can't I think of that thing? Like, why is it so hard for me to concentrate right now? And like, if we had $1 for every time someone's like, I'm so easily distracted and my biggest problem is I can't focus and like prioritization is a big problem for me. I almost want to like prescribe sleep. Go take a nap and like have a nutrient dense smoothie and some breathing exercises. And so you and I are pretty big into the health world and that sort of thing. And we see this all the time where that people are just like, oh, meditate and yoga and eat well. And like it comes across as to this point, I feel like people are like muted to that, right? We just hear it all the time. Yes, we know we should be taking care of ourselves. But the more research I do into the science of why, and as someone who's like working with people in optimizing their performance, their business performance, but what good is your business if you yourself are dying and you don't have any energy to do the things that we've prescribed for you? It's really increased the recognition for me that taking care of your physical vessel is first. And if you're to the point where you're burned out, you're confused even, like you're not sure where to go, like chances are you need to go, and it sounds so cliche, you need to go within. You need to fuel the body, give it the nutrients it needs, give it the rest that it needs, and really pay attention to how long have you been trying to grind it out without doing those necessary things. And it's not sexy, it's not easy, but it might be the thing that your business needs most if you're going to take it from wherever it is right now to that next level. I got a weekly check-in or a monthly check-in from one of our newest accelerator members. I'm going to call out Addison on this one because he shared the story of how for the past year he's been training for this marathon and he had to make a lot of sacrifices in his life in order to make this possible. He gets up super early. He's cut out alcohol from his life. He has this pretty strict training regimen. And he mentioned that this experience for him has made him realize he can do anything. And that was one of the things that triggered my conversation with you this weekend was this recognition that when Addison learned to trust his body, he showed up in a totally different way for his business. And I'm sure in his family and the rest of his life too. Obviously, I don't have insight into that. But when he learned to trust his body, when he learned his body could do hard things, it completely changed his relationship with how he could perform in other areas of his life. And so I think for that reason, all of this really brings us back to it's a body first mentality. If you want to do great things in life and business, you really have to pay attention to the support that you're giving your body.
We see people numb with things like caffeine, alcohol, insert, right? People are numbing out. And so what happens is the body says, I'm tired. And they say, let me get another latte. Or the body says, I'm stressed out. And they say, let me get another tequila. And those things are still external stimulus when really, like, if you just take a nap, then you can be of huge service to your body, to your nervous system, and not trying to escape the body. I think so many people are trying to escape their body, right? Anything to not feel. And I know this intimately. I've had chronic migraines since I was a very small child. My mother had them. It's common in the matriarchal lineage on her side. And I've done all the tests. I've done all the tests, all the hormones, all the minerals, all the blood tests, and I'm healthy. I'm really healthy. I still get these freaking migraines and they wipe me out. But what I've started to embrace is that that's part of my journey. What forces me to go within, which anybody who knows me knows that going within is like a huge part of my process. And so actually I'm pretty grateful for those moments where like I absolutely have to, because I don't always prioritize it. You and I are just as guilty of numbing and running as anybody else. And so, I'm working through my own relationship with how am I being there for my body? How am I listening? How am I nourishing her so that I know that she's optimized? And I love to take a nap. We make really good money when I nap. Every time I make good money, MVP makes good money when I take a nap. Naps are powerful things. And so embracing the art of slowing down. And I like to tell people when we're bending time, like when I teach time bending magic, is slow down to speed up. Anytime you're like, I don't have enough time, that's an indicator that you need to slow down. And even though that feels counterintuitive, when you slow down, you're more conscious of what's happening. And for whatever reason, 9 times out of 10, the universe supports you in that. And like you find out that the meeting's been moved anyway, you know? And so slow down to speed up. There's a song that I love by Trevor Hall, and he says something about time. And he says, "You're not running out, you're really running in." And so any time that you feel like you don't have enough time, that's the time you have to sit and go slow. But there's an old adage. What's that old? It's like maybe a Buddhist quote.
Yes, I was just looking it up, actually. It's funny that you said that. There's this old adage, if you don't have time to meditate for an hour every day, you should meditate for 2 hours.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly. You have to slow down because otherwise you're just like, where are we running to? You know, like a lot of the inner work that I've done has made me realize that like I'm only rushing toward an end. And we all have the same end. All of us will meet our maker, right? Everybody's going to die. And if you're in a rush to get through every single day and hurry up and be the most productive you can possibly be in that day, you're just running toward death. Slow down, smell the roses. Well, not, I don't like the smell of roses. Smell the lilies.
Smell whatever smells good to you. One of the things that I've noticed about tracking my HRV is that, and you and I've had this conversation for years, I love tequila. I love it with like big L, little L, all the L's. And from like a taste perspective, I just find it to just, it's like a very happy fluid for me. And when I started tracking my HRV, I could see, and even I didn't have to drink a lot, even, and it would have impacts on my nervous system. For 2 days, I would see a very significant impact in how my nervous system functions. And that to me was fascinating because I'm one of those people that can drink and not be hungover. When I was younger, I definitely was drinking crap, I think, and just not very good about it. Now I know like where my limit is. I know what to drink. So good tequila, no additives, and don't go overboard. And I'll feel golden the next day. But do I? You know what I mean? Like I thought I was fine. My nervous system says no. And this has all been part of my journey. And so, like anyone who's listening here who might potentially use alcohol as a coping mechanism, raising hand here, you're self-medicating with alcohol because it allows you to relax at the end of the night. And you're like, it doesn't really impact my life. And so what's the harm if I have a little bit here, there, and everywhere? And there's a whole discussion there around like the trend in sobriety, the trend in the sober curious in our industry. I feel like it's important for us to talk about these trends from a business standpoint as well, but also from a societal shift standpoint in that we have more science now than we ever did before around alcohol. And we are literally an industry that promotes alcohol consumption. And I don't want to demonize it. That's not something that is in my belief set. We don't want to create resistance around a thing. But I do think it's powerful for us to recognize that if we are entrepreneurs and we are in the alcohol industry and we are consuming alcohol with regularity because it's a part of what we do, and it's important for us to cocktail taste and stay up to date on all the important things that we are recommending to our clients, knowing what it does to our nervous system, and then being able to recognize that if our nervous system is irregulated, that will potentially impact my ability to show up as the best entrepreneur that I can. Do I have energy for my business? Do I have mental clarity to do things like when I have mental clarity, I can do a thing in 30 minutes that might take me 3 hours any other day. And so when you talk about time bending, collapsing time, we also could talk about that just about efficiency and productivity. And from working very intimately with people in our accelerator program, I see this come up quite a bit that every week people are asked to check in and check out. It's not required, but a lot of them do. And when it comes to like what didn't go well, so many times people are like, well, I got distracted or I spent 3 hours doing this thing and like it shouldn't have taken me that long. And no judgment on that. Me too. If I'm not, in the mindset to do a thing, it's going to take me way longer to do that thing. But sometimes that might just be the fact that I don't have the mental clarity. And I might not have the mental clarity because a part of my body is like, you need a nap or you need some magnesium, or your nervous system here, Sarah, is still recovering from the fact that, you had drinks last night when you went out and had some fun. And, as someone who historically came from the food and beverage industry. Alcohol has always been around. It's also a social lubricant. And going to my family reunion or going to a soccer game and not drinking sounded like absolute crazy. Like, why wouldn't you? Literally, that's why people go to these tailgates, is so that they can. And literally, there's Jello shots, there's cuckoo juice, there's beer, there's people doing like shots of all sorts of things off of these like ski looking things. Like, it's a culture, it's a whole ass culture to be drinking alcohol. And it's completely new for me to be going to those things and not drinking alcohol. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, "Oh, I could never." I didn't think so either. But it turns out you don't die if you do it. And it's not really as weird as you think these days. I just brought some like poppies. The cherry limeade is the only one that I like. I think the rest actually tastes like garbage, but the cherry limeade is really good. So I brought a couple of those. I had my own little koozie. Nobody cared and nobody asked. And I actually didn't feel like I was missing out on anything either. And because I wasn't drinking at the time, I was much more able to recognize the cues from my body when I was getting tired, when I was getting hungry, when I was getting overwhelmed because of all the noise and like all the things. And so that's just an example of kind of when you talked about numbing, that's just an example. We push ourselves and we try and eliminate all of these physical cues because they're uncomfortable or they make us feel like we need to leave early. Like I have a friend who we call it the Irish goodbye. If she's tired at a party, even if she got there 30 minutes ago, she'll peace out. She will not say goodbye. She'll either fall asleep on the couch shamelessly or she'll leave and later will be like, "Hey, where'd you go?" And she's like, "I was tired." And she can party. Like this girl can party, but she also feels no shame about being like, I was tired." And like that to me used to be like the joke and now like goals, life goals.
So, Sarah, you started this as the reason people avoid their seat of power. And it's not necessarily avoiding so much as that they can't hold it, right? We see people that can't, they literally cannot sit in their seat of power because they don't trust themselves, probably because of years of self sabotage, self sacrifice, self abuse. And to wrap it back up, let's
Yeah.
talk about that seat of power and your realizations this weekend that people literally cannot hold their business or the pressure that entrepreneurial ventures impose. What you left in my telegram this weekend was pretty profound around why they just can't sit there.
Yeah, thank you for bringing us back to where we had intended to go with this. I feel like I've kind of touched on it throughout the monologues here, but ultimately the importance of this podcast is that if you're going to run a very successful business, you have to be capable of sitting in the seat of power. And to sit in the seat of power, you have to trust yourself above all else. And it's not uncommon for me to give feedback in a program and then suddenly it causes people to spiral out because they're like questioning everything about their world and their life and all of their foundations, everything they thought they knew about themselves and where they were going and what the business was going to do. And now suddenly it's all been upended, all because I provided a little bit of feedback or perspective, even. It's not even like, listen to me. It's like, hey, have you thought about it from this angle? And that comes from not trusting in themselves, not trusting that they have. I want to say, like the way that this shows up in my head is like you're sitting in the throne, but there's like roots that are, stemming from the throne and actually anchoring it into the ground. So yeah, the throne is nice to sit on, but like if you push over the throne, then you're no longer in your seat of power. You want it to be like cemented into the ground so that you remain very aware of who you are. And that is a personal development journey all in itself, is recognizing what resonates with you, what doesn't, who are you not. Like you have to take a stance. As much as we like to live in kind of the ether here and like I can be anyone in the world, but for you to show up powerfully in the world, like you have to recognize who are you and who are you not. Who do you want to show up as? What are your values? That's why we always start with mission, vision, value work. And I'm telling you, the mission, vision, value work will throw people. They will just really agonize over the process of choosing their mission, vision, and values. And then for months afterwards, they're like, maybe I should change my mission. Let's ignore the mission. You did the mission work. Now let's be the mission. And if you own a business, you're the CEO of a business or your life even, and the wind blows and that causes you to change, then you are not in your seat of power. Your seat of power requires you to take ownership over your physical vessel, ownership over everything that you've claimed to be yours. So, like your business, for example. And so, when someone gives you perspective, you can listen, you can hear, you can reflect on that, and then you can throw it out in the trash if it doesn't feel good. It doesn't have to make, even if it's from an expert, if all of that throws you, if any of that makes you question everything in your life, it's because you haven't owned your seat of power and you don't trust yourself, because the things that you come up with, the ideas that you have, the business ideas that you bring to life come from an entire lifetime of experiences. Now, we want you to continue to grow and to continue to change and to learn new things and to grow those roots that are coming down from the bottom of your throne to be deeper and more prolific. But what we don't want is for you to second guess yourself all the time, like you don't know a thing. You do know things. You know lots of things. That's like how you got to be where you are. And that, in my opinion, I think that starts in learning to trust your body. What other piece of you is more you than your body? The divine intelligence of the body is absolutely astounding. Scientists, I think, underplay and undercredit how absolutely phenomenal the body is at doing its thing. And oftentimes, when we have scientific research that doesn't go well, it's because we just didn't understand why the body does what it does, but the body knows, right? And so if you trust the divine intelligence of your body that was created by God, the universe, as the most advanced piece of technology in the world, like how and why do you think you know better than it knows? Right? Like, let's be humbled here for a moment and just appreciate the piece of technology that is our body and trust it to do its thing and be a good steward of it. And what we know now is that it needs things like awesome sleep. It needs things like vitamins and minerals in order to make it do its thing. It needs you to move it. It literally needs you to move it. Like, it can't just be sedentary. A lot of the issues that we have in our bodies these days are the result of a sedentary lifestyle, which society is like, sit in front of this computer for 8 hours a day and life will be good. We know that that's not the case any longer. So however you're able to get that in, whether it's walking and talking, I'm like thinking about trialing like walking office hours instead of just, hey, let's all sit at our desks for an hour today, right? I think we can get creative in how we move our bodies. But again, if there was one thing that I could recommend to the listeners this week that will pay off in their business and life a thousandfold, it's spend this week just really learning to trust your body. And I'll never forget the thing that you said to me on one of our first calls together years ago now, when it came to intuition. And you were saying that I want you to lean so hard into your intuition that if you're in the middle of a sentence and your body says that you need to go to the bathroom, you need to stop and go to the bathroom. And at first, like, you kind of chuckled and I kind of chuckled, and it was kind of like, okay, if only life worked that way. But even something like an exercise as silly as that is going to go a long way in helping you recognize, oh, yeah, my body does know what it needs and my body does know what it's doing. And the result from listening to your body and giving what it needs is a much better, stronger business. And will be a much better, stronger business owner with mental clarity, a regulated nervous system. You won't flail out. You probably won't second guess yourself so often. You'll have more confidence. It'll pay for itself a hundredfold.
A tangible practice that I give to seekers that I work with when we're working through self trust is to first identify anything in our world that needs change, first has to be identified. And a lot of people skip over the identification process and they rush right into like the change process. The problem is you didn't have a really good understanding of where the need for change was rooted, right? And so first just identify. And so spend a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, spend some time identifying how often you self-betray, right? Because that's what this is. If you don't have self-trust, it's because you are in a perpetual state of self-betrayal. Self-betrayal looks like the body says, I would like some water, and you say, I'll have a tall macchiato, please. The body says, I would like a nap, and you say, I'll have another tall macchiato, please. And then the body says, okay, we're really freaking fried on caffeine. We would like to just chill. And you say, now I'll have tequila, right? You just, the body is like constantly telling you what it wants. And the body's like, that salad looks delicious. Let's buy all the stuff and make the nutrient dense lunch. And you're like, I'll take a Whopper Junior with cheese. These things are self-betrayal. If the body is like, I'm too stressed out to do this email, and you're like, we just got to pump it out, I'll have another coffee. All of these things are examples of ways that the body is telling you what it needs, and you're numbing or betraying yourself. And so then you're in a mistrusted, imagine if that was a person, right? If you were partnered with somebody who was like, all right, I'll be there at 3, and you were like, oh, cool, I'll be there at 3 too. And then you just didn't show up, right? Like that person would eventually, the trust would be eroded. So if we can't treat our body with integrity, then we can't move in the world with integrity. And so the number one thing you can do is start identifying how often you are in a cycle of self-betrayal. And then once you're like, why am I doing that? Potentially it comes up that your worth or your value in the world is wrapped up in your ability to be productive, so on and so forth. That's another podcast. But start looking at, why am I doing these things? Then you can start gently and with acceptance and with love making change. We don't want to demonize ourselves into change, right? Because then we're just overloading our nervous system even more because we're like a dictator at that point. And then that's not sustainable. Eventually, you're like, I've eaten all the salads I can eat. I want a cheeseburger. When instead you start to say, I can do both and. Right? It's sometimes my body really is like, girl, you better get that Whopper with cheese. You better do it. Sometimes she wants that. And then other times she wants a green smoothie, right? With ginger in it, right? And so when you're listening, when you're attuning yourself just to listen, then that relationship, that communication improves and you can create and establish trust. And then you have a solid foundation. Those roots are really deep and you can start to move in the world without being swayed by the wind.
This is also delicious. This is going to be potentially a longer podcast, but I hope we keep this in here because I think it's really important for us to give these specific examples, especially the intimate examples that we're utilizing of our own experience, which I think it's important for us to note that I'm a very intellectual person. You're a very intellectual person, but I have intellectualized as a way of coping with a lot of the things that have happened in my life. And when you do that, when you intellectualize everything, including migraines, right? So like you have migraines, I had, and not so much anymore, but for a really long time, had like chronic lower back pain. I called you one day just crying because it was so bad. My family were like, why are you walking like that? I was like, because like I can't walk. Like that's how bad my back pain was. And for a long time, when I was doing my mobile bar, I would ignore it for the entire busy season. It would usually start right around September, which is our busy wedding season. And by December, I couldn't walk. And that was because I had to work. I had to lift the 300 pounds of ice. And so I was ignoring my body's cues. And so when you started my process of rediscovering that I had a body, which was like, oh, Jesus, I guess I do. You know what I mean? Because I lived so much in my head that it was like my body was an afterthought. And so when you said, just like when you feel like you need to go to the bathroom, stop everything you're doing, you're going to the bathroom. It seemed like such a silly example, but that is one physical cue that no matter how disconnected you are from your body, you still have that. And so when you are giving examples of like your body wants water, your body wants salad, if you're listening to this and you're like, how would I know if my body wants a salad? And you don't notice, or that's not something that you ever register, that's okay. Start with just registering the most urgent of bodily requests. And over time, I swear to you, you will reawaken the intuition and that connection to the body that we have. And it'll become more clear as to what the body is asking for. Now, my kids, I even have to do this work with because my 7-year-old, who's not a great eater, which was a really rude awakening for me because my 10-year-old has eaten anything and everything from the time she was like a baby. Brussels sprouts, loves them. Pate, loves them. And then I've got my 7-year-old who will eat hot dogs and grilled cheese, and that's it. So I don't know what we did wrong there. But anyways, she finished dinner the other day, and then 15 minutes later, she's like, I'm hungry. I told her, you're not hungry, but you're probably thirsty. And she's like, no, I'm not thirsty. I'm like, I promise you, those cues in your body feel very much the same. Have a glass of water and then we'll talk about it. And so like some of this really does need to be taught because, you're just learning your body when you're 7 years old. And so if you're like me, 41 years into life, and you're going through this journey of actually getting to know your body, it's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So like I was a vegetarian for 13 years, and health wise, not great for me. If you believe any of that blood test stuff, like vegetarianism is one of the better ways. And I've tried going and doing like the paleo diet, and I actually ended up in the hospital, but that's for another story, another time. So like being a vegetarian is actually something my body for the most part really likes, but being strict vegetarian caused my iron to drop. And this is someone who I was eating spinach smoothies on the regular. You know what I mean? So like it's not that I wasn't getting that. It's that I wasn't in the proper way for my body to be able to absorb that. So every once in a while, I will get a hankering for a burger. And that's usually, I know at that point, okay, my iron is probably low. I have a hard time holding on to iron. And I've been anemic since the time I think I tried to give blood when I was like 18 years old. And they're like, you're anemic. You can't give blood. I was like, what? So, anyways, all of this, and the long story short here is that if you're like, how am I supposed to learn to trust my body? And you hear all of these examples of things that, if your body is like, you need a nap, and you're like, macchiato, that one's probably an easier one to recognize because we all fall asleep every day. And so we kind of get that sense. But also, if you're not sure if, you're craving a hamburger because that's just a thing that you want, or if your body really needs it, then that's part of the work. You don't have to know right now. Like start with the things that are obvious and we can work from there.
I want you to look at your relationship with your body as another entity. This is great work. Anybody who's ever read the book, The Alter Ego Effect, sometimes things are so close to us that we need to give them external personas in order to like really register what's going on. And so look at your body as if it was outside of you, right? And you've created so much mistrust and so much self-betrayal that now it's not talking to you anymore. And when it does talk to you, it's screaming. And usually it's screaming so loud, you're stressed out. You're like, tall macchiato, please. Right. Like, so when you create this level of trust within the body, it will slowly start to talk to you again and it will slowly start to trust you again. And you just have to show it that you're here for it. Now, here's the thing, guys. If you're listening to this and you're like, this all sounds great, but my business will fail. Sarah says that she stopped toting ice because she couldn't because of her back. What would I do? We're not so big as to say that the mobile bar industry is the only place that you should be. If this industry is stressing you TF out, if this industry is robbing your body, maybe it's not the right industry for you. And that's okay. You know what I mean? That's okay. The other thing is that if you're listening to this and you're like, right, this all sounds great, but also I have a business to run. We are talking to you.
These are the same people that are self-identified as like control freaks, and the business would fail without them. And can you imagine all of that stress? I can, because I was that person for a long time, but like walking around thinking the world would fail if you weren't able to show up every day. One of the things that we teach in our programming, both through the academy and the accelerator, is how not to be the bottleneck in your business. If you got sick and ended up in the hospital for a week, your business should not fail because of that. And if it does, then your business isn't a business. And I don't say that with any maliciousness, but if you are your business, then it is not necessarily a business, because if something happens to you and the business then no longer thrives, a business is an entity outside of oneself. It is an entity that would exist even without a singular person. And there's nothing wrong with having, a quote, like the government will call it a business, but it's really just you. We call that a sole proprietorship, or even if it's an LLC, but it's a pass through. All of that is technical jargon. But if the whole business relies on you and someone is hiring you to do their thing, then that can feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing and the point that I would also like to make is that like soul first, body first, like no amount of money is worth for what? You know what I mean? If you're not here for what? And
Right.
so the body has to come first. And that's where you were this weekend when you were like, this is potentially going to change a lot of things about the way we approach coaching because you felt really passionately around body first coaching. And similarly, I feel really powerfully about energy first coaching because like those two things are not separate things. We just use different words for them, right? And so I hope this lands for somebody who's listening, and I hope that you find a level of integrity and a level of trust and a level of deep reverence for your physical vessel that enables you to interface with this physical reality every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And then recognizing that your business, your life, the entirety of your existence is dependent upon your physical vessel. And so if you're struggling with things like focus, if you're struggling with things like exhaustion, if you're struggling with emotional regulation, if you're struggling with depression, self-doubt, all of these things stem from the relationship that you have with your body. Now, some of them are actually like you go and you get medication for these things because your body can't do the thing it needs to do all by itself. And some of that's genetic, some of that's societal, some of that is potentially that like we've depleted it of all the things that it needs to regulate itself inherently and naturally. And no judgment from me on any of those particular scenarios, but you need to take ownership of your vessel. You need to prioritize your body because it is without it, you don't get to do any of the work. None of it. And so this is an invitation for people to pause grinding away in their business and start looking at the body that makes their business possible and really learning to listen to it prior to all the other things, including the business books, me, unless you want to talk more about your body and how you can better support it. I'm happy. Both of us are happy to have those conversations. We've been on that journey. And maybe I'll kind of finish this off with like, if you don't want to listen to me about these things, there are lots of doctors and professionals that talk about these things at great length. One of my favorite is The Body Keeps the Score. That's written by Bessel van der Kolk. My newest favorite is Outlive, which is The Science of Art and Longevity by Peter Attia. And then obviously Why We Sleep. And I don't have that one in front of me, so I don't have the author easily at hand. But those are three really great books that I think have been pivotal in my ability to recognize how important the body is, not only to my business and the work that I do in the world, but to my ability to show up for hopefully another 40, 50, 60 years for my loved ones. And why spend all of this time learning what I know and becoming the person that I am, not to take care of the thing that's going to allow me to share that with the world for longer. So, yeah, again, another slight diversion from our standard business related content. But as we continue to work more intimately with people on their businesses, it becomes more and more obvious that we can't just throw business information at them and expect them to do great things with it because we are holistic beings. And part of that, we've got the mind, and we talk a lot about mindset, and that's certainly another piece of it. But then there's the body, and that's what this episode's about.
Lovely. We'll see you guys on the next one.
And that wraps up today's episode. I hope it was valuable. I would love to hear from you what you thought. You can drop me a line at hello@mobilebevpros.com or find me on Instagram at mobilebevpros. If you're looking for more valuable mobile bar related content, we have a website full of it. You can find us at www.mobilebevpros.com. And I'd love to see you in our Facebook community, also by the name of, you guessed it, Mobile Bev Pros. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, cheers.